Coming to get you, Bobber.
Voorhees is a 2020 horror movie directed by Cody Falk, and it stars Eileen Sugamelli, Dan Young and Alice Bosga. Director Cody Falk has asked me to watch this movie and give it a review, and this is going to be a spoiler review, guys, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, don't watch this because there's going to be spoilers in here. Following a successful bank heist, a group of criminals flee to the now abandoned Camp Crystal Lake with the idea of hiding from the law until dawn. As with most fan films, guys, I don't really talk about the acting in the films because most of the time the acting's under par, and it's the same with this one as well. There's no acting in this movie that's sublime. There's no acting in it that stands out, although there was one guy, I think his name is Norman. He's one of the crazy guys in this film, the older gentleman. I think he was pretty good, but everybody else was your typical fan film actor. But that's not bad, that's not a bad thing, that's just typical of a fan film. When we look at the quality of the filming, I think there were some scenes, I don't know if this was intentional or unintentional, but there were some scenes that just looked squint, and they looked squint in an unintentional way, and I think that maybe they could have fixed some of the angles. Again, if it was intentional, I just didn't see that, but I didn't see the point in some of the intentional, if it was intentional, squint scenes. One thing I did like about the quality of the angles and things was we got a variety of angles for certain scenes. We've got some drone footage as well. We've got different camera angles for some of the scenes. Now I do know that in some fan films you only get one angle because that's all they can afford. One angle and that's it. And it's okay, but I think if you show a different perspective of a same scene, it adds volume to that scene. So something that Cody done really well was give us different angles of the scenes, so I think that adds to the quality of it. A couple of other points about the video, the filming of this, is another few scenes as well where it looks like the heads are cut off in that scene, and again it looks unintentional. There was a scene with Jason Voorhees where his head's kind of cut off about there, and it didn't add to the scene. I think you would have had to zoom out a bit or zoom right in. Now for that scene in particular, I can see maybe why they had restraints because they were inside a building, so maybe they couldn't go too far out or too far in. But in other scenes as well, the heads were cut off, so I don't think that was intentional. I think it was an accident. One other point about the video was the shutter speed of the camera that they were using seemed off. I don't know if they tried to use an automatic or manual. I set my shutter speed on this to 1/50, and that gives you a smooth video. Don't ask me why. I think it's the frames per second. So if I put mine to 150, you get that smooth look. Well, I'm hoping it's smooth anyway. Whereas on this one, there was times where it looked too jittery, as if the shutter speed was wrong or automatic, and then there was times where the shutter speed or the video looked too smooth for the scene that it was in. And again, I think that might be because it was either put on automatic or the wrong settings. I'll quickly talk about the score because I think the score was original. The score that they used in it, I didn't hear it in anything else before, so I don't think it was reused by anything. And I did see there was somebody who'd done the music in the end credits, so props to Cody and the crew for getting their own score, if it is indeed their own score. I think the score was possibly overused because I know that they couldn't really use a lot of music in it for rights purposes, so they probably replaced scenes where you would put music in with score again. So I think it was maybe overused, but sometimes the score was really loud and it put me off certain scenes. So I think if they toned down the score volume wise and used it less, it would have been better. There was a scene at the beginning as well where you've got music playing and people talking but you don't hear any words, they're silent. That puts me off films as well, whether they're fan films or not. That puts me off because anytime I see people moving their mouths, I think we should at least hear something and not just silence and just score instead. So again, I don't know if that was intentional, but it's something I would have preferred to see them see without, basically. Some of the dialogue in the film is like, it's a fan film, so you can't really complain too much, but some of the dialogue seemed like it was sentence for sentence, almost like in a scene where they were talking, they were reading from a board or they were trying to memorize it so much that it didn't come off right when they were saying it. So I think the dialogue could have been tightened up a little bit, or maybe the actors in the film could have been more natural with their sentences that they were talking. But again, it wasn't all the way throughout the movie, just certain scenes that kind of was off-putting. Some of the movements by some of the characters were unrealistic. You had the sheriff who, when he killed someone, I don't know who it was, he was only in it for one scene, but before he killed him, he used his gun and turned it sideways gangster style. I just don't see a police officer doing that, but again, that's just my opinion. This movie does take place predominantly during the day. I think it's maybe 54 minutes or so where we see nighttime, and I think what they struggled with was the night shots. There was a lot of grain in there. I think they relied on the campfires to light their scene most of the time. Now that's okay in dribs and drabs, but if you're relying on a campfire or a torch, a flashlight, to light your scene, then you're in trouble. So I think the day shots were fine, you can see everybody, everything was fine, the lighting was okay, but when it got to the night shots, that's where they really struggled, and that's where I was wanting to see more of the action. I wanted to see the quality come there with the night shots, because Jason obviously comes more at night in this film, and to see Jason in a good light, I think we need to get more mood lighting, more atmosphere. Without that, then it's just like a dark movie. The location was another issue for me. They did film it in somewhere that looked abandoned, but it didn't resemble Camp Crystal Lake whatsoever. Now, we did have like the Camp Crystal Lake sign that they've got and stuff, but there was nothing to tell me that it was Camp Crystal Lake, and I know that obviously they had no budget or a small budget, so they were restrained on where they could show or film the movie, but there was no cabins, like summer camp cabins. There was abandoned farmhouse looking things, but you didn't see any of that in the Friday the 13th movies when they were at Camp Crystal Lake. So I think if they got a better location, then maybe the overall look of the movie would have been better. We'll move on to Jason. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't like the introduction to this Jason. I think the introduction to Jason was forced and it didn't fit the scene that they placed him in. So I think if they introduced Jason in a better way, it would have been better. I just wasn't a fan of how they introduced him. Jason, on the other hand, how he looked was great. I think he was really big and tall and menacing. The kill scenes were great. I think he was very menacing and scary. So I think the best thing about this film was Jason. I think he was excellent. I think if you placed the person that played Jason in this in a Friday the 13th movie, he wouldn't look out of place. He looked that good. I think the gloves that he was wearing, I think they were supposed to be his hands. They could have been a little better, but the mask itself was good. They obviously took the hockey mask off and you can see his face. Everything was fine with Jason. I had no complaints with him. The only issue I would say, if I had to bring up an issue, was the hockey mask he was wearing had some sort of black thing underneath it, so you couldn't see his eyes, but I think you have to see his eyes a little bit. I know in the darkness and in the distance it's better not to see his eyes, keeps the mystery going, but when you've got close-ups, take that little black thing away so you can see his eyes, unless they didn't have eyes that they could use. But I think not being able to see his eyes up close like that and seeing the mesh was the only off-putting thing. But apart from that, props to them for the Jason that they had. The only issue with the story with this Jason was he was a secondary character. Up until the very end where you see more of him, he was a secondary character throughout the film because of the storyline that they went for. So I think if they implemented Jason into that storyline a little bit better, we could have maybe seen more of Jason, but that's just a nitpick. I did mention I liked the kill scenes with Jason as well. I think what I really liked about this was the gore. They didn't hold back on the gore. Now obviously the gore was a fan film style gore, and that's fine, but I think some of the scenes they used that were kind of off camera, and then you seen the aftermath of the wound or the death, I think that was really good. So I think they utilised the blood that they had and the budget that they had very well. So yeah, the blood and the gore was really good. Traditionally you have a final girl or a final boy for these Friday the 13th movies, but something I was struggling with throughout the whole entire film was who was the final girl slash final boy. I know that we had a survivor at the end there, but she wasn't cemented as the final girl because she came at the beginning and then she disappeared, and then she came back and disappeared, so I wasn't really rooting for her. And then we had one of the bad guys. I was rooting for her a little bit as well because she looked like she was going to be the only survivor until she died as well. So I'm thinking, where is this final person that I'm supposed to be rooting for? It's all good that Jason's killing everybody, but I want someone to root for in the end. But in this film, I didn't have anyone to root for. In terms of the storyline, I think the storyline was unique for a Friday the 13th movie. It's sort of like the storyline for the 2017 Leatherface movie that I just done a review for. That's the sort of style that it looks like they went for with Friday the 13th. And with that, you risk making Jason a backseat character, which is what he was at the end of the day. I think it was an ambitious attempt at creating a fan film for this type of storyline, but at the same time, I think it was even more ambitious to make it a feature-length movie. This movie lasted almost 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was about 1 hour and 39 minutes, including the credits. That's very ambitious for a fan film, and you have to have the storyline to carry that length of time. Unfortunately, I don't think the storyline needed to last that long. I think if they made this half the length, maybe 45 minutes or so, then we could have crammed a little bit more in, taken some things out, and we would have been more invested in the story. One of my biggest issues is this felt like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan film stuck in the body of a Friday the 13th fan film.
We shouldn't be here.
By no means is this a bad fan film whatsoever. Again, I always give props to anyone making a fan film, especially ones that are a feature length, so I really commend everyone involved for doing this. It just wasn't my type of fan film, and it wasn't my type of Jason fan film, but I'm sure there's going to be fans of this type of movie everywhere. I'm still looking forward to seeing what Cody Falk and the rest of the crew do in the future. One thing I would like to see from this gang is for them to make a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan film. There's not that many Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan films out there, and the ones that are out there are not that great. But I think if they take everything that they've done in Voorhees and bring it to a Texas Chainsaw Massacre Leatherface fan film, I think that would be really interesting, because the grime and the gore and the grain of Cody's fan film is there. Take that into a Leatherface fan film, that could be interesting. If you've seen Voorhees, guys, as always, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of it, and let me know what you think of this in terms of Friday the 13th fan films, because I know there is a lot of fan films out there, but let me know how this ranks for you in the fan film world. And as always, guys, thanks a lot for watching again. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.